Maya Daniels bounced on the balls of her feet as she clutched her boarding pass, her heart fluttering with excitement. She had flown before, but never in first class. The thought of reclining seats, gourmet meals, and plush blankets felt like stepping into a dream. Her father, Anthony Daniels, walked beside her, his presence calm and composed as always. "First time in first class, huh?" he teased, nudging her playfully. She grinned. "Yep, I'm going to enjoy every second of it." As they stepped onto the aircraft, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and leather seats filled the air. The first-class cabin was everything Maya had imagined, spacious, luxurious, and inviting. She glanced down at the seat number on her ticket, 2A, right by the window. Perfect. But as she moved toward her seat, a sharp voice cut through the cabin. "Excuse me, young lady." Maya stopped mid-step. A tall, stern-looking flight attendant with tightly pulled-back blonde hair and a crisp uniform blocked her path. Her name tag read Ms. Calloway. Her icy blue eyes swept over Maya's hoodie and sneakers with barely concealed disapproval. "You must be lost," Ms. Calloway said with a tight smile. "Economy is toward the back." Maya blinked, taken aback. "No, I have a seat in first class." She held up her ticket, the gold lettering clearly showing 2A first class. Ms. Calloway didn't even glance at it. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Maya said, her voice wavering slightly. "This is my seat." The flight attendant's smile thinned. "I'm sure whoever booked your ticket didn't realize, but we have strict seating policies. First class is reserved for premium passengers." Maya felt a tight knot form in her chest. She knew exactly what Miss Calloway meant. Passengers around them had started to notice. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others simply watched, waiting to see how this would play out. An older woman in the row ahead frowned and looked at Maya sympathetically. "I don't mind switching seats with her," the woman offered kindly. "That won't be necessary," Miss Calloway said quickly, her tone growing sharper. "She needs to return to her assigned class." Maya's fingers curled into a fist around her boarding pass. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, not just from embarrassment, but from something deeper. Then a voice, calm, yet commanding, broke through the tension. "She's in her assigned class," Anthony Daniels said. The entire first-class cabin turned. Anthony stood tall, his tailored suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. Maya's heart lifted. Her father always had a way of making things right. "And you are?" Miss Calloway asked, crossing her arms. Anthony reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing an airline ID badge. "Anthony Daniels," he said, his voice cool and composed. "CEO of Horizon Airways?" The color drained from Ms. Calloway's face. The passengers around them gasped, a few even whispering in hushed voices. Maya watched as the power dynamic shifted in an instant. Miss Calloway's lips parted, but no words came out. For a moment, the cabin stood still. The once confident Miss Calloway now looked as if the ground beneath her had vanished. Maya had never seen someone go from authoritative to speechless so quickly. Anthony Daniels didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. He slipped his ID back into his pocket and leveled his gaze at Ms. Calloway. "I'm sorry, sir, she started. But Anthony raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "No need for excuses," he said smoothly. "I'd just like to understand something. What exactly led you to assume my daughter didn't belong here?" Miss Calloway's mouth opened, then closed again. She quickly scanned the faces of the surrounding passengers, some of whom were now watching with thinly veiled judgment. A few had their phones in their hands. Whether they were recording or just pretending to, the damage was done. I was just following protocol," she stammered. "We have to ensure passengers are seated correctly. And sometimes mistakes happen with booking. Anthony nodded slowly, as if considering her words. A mistake? He echoed. Did you ask to see anyone else's ticket? Or just my daughter's? Ms. Calloway hesitated. The hesitation was enough of an answer. Maya, still standing with her boarding pass clenched in her fingers, felt a mixture of emotions, anger, embarrassment, but most of all, pride. Her father wasn't yelling or causing a scene. He was simply holding Ms. Calloway accountable in a way that made it impossible for her to wriggle out of. I assure you, it wasn't personal, Ms. Calloway said quickly, but the conviction in her voice was gone. I was just making an assumption. Anthony finished for her. Another silence. This one heavier. A man in a suit, likely another airline employee, hurried down the aisle, his expression tense. Mr. Daniels, he said, slightly out of breath. Is there an issue? There was, Anthony said, his tone measured. But I believe it's being corrected. The man's eyes darted to Ms. Calloway, who stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. He nodded stiffly. Of course, sir. Let me personally escort your daughter to her seat. Anthony turned to Maya, offering a reassuring smile. Go ahead, sweetheart. Maya exhaled, finally moving to her seat. The leather was soft beneath her as she buckled in, her fingers still trembling from the confrontation. Miss Calloway stood awkwardly in the aisle, her face pale. Anthony took a step closer to her and said in a low, even voice, Horizon Airways prides itself on inclusivity and professionalism. If a passenger holds a first-class ticket, that should be the only thing that matters. Ms. Calloway gave a stiff nod, avoiding his eyes. As Anthony settled in beside Maya, she glanced at him. Do you think she'll get fired? He sighed. That's not my decision. But she'll remember this moment. Maya looked out the window, watching the runway lights blur past. She already knew. This flight was going to be unforgettable. As the plane taxied down the runway, Maya felt her heart begin to slow. The confrontation with the flight attendant had left a lingering unease in her chest, but her father's calm, yet firm response reassured her. She stole a glance at him. Anthony Daniels, the man she had always admired, was flipping through the in-flight magazine as if nothing had happened. But Maya knew better. She had seen the subtle tightening of his jaw when Ms. Calloway had questioned her right to be in first class. She had noticed the way his fingers had pressed together, a habit of his whenever he was forcing himself to remain calm. The engines roared, and the plane lifted off the ground, pressing her back into the plush seat. She exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the lingering weight of the moment. A few minutes later, the fasten seatbelt sign dinged off, and a different flight attendant, a young man named Daniel, appeared beside them. His expression was careful, but warm. Mr. Daniels, Ms. Maya, he said, his voice smooth but respectful. I'd like to personally apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. If there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable, please let me know. Maya glanced at her father, waiting for his response. Anthony looked up from his magazine and gave a small nod. Appreciate that, Daniel. Just make sure my daughter is treated like every other passenger who paid for their seat. Daniel straightened. Understood, sir. He hesitated for a moment, then turned slightly toward Maya. Miss, would you like anything to drink? We have fresh orange juice, sparkling water, and... Maya shook her head politely. I'm okay. Thank you. Daniel gave a slight bow before disappearing down the aisle. Maya turned to her father. So that's it, she asked, a note of frustration in her voice. Anthony raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, Ms. Calloway. She basically accused me of not belonging here. She embarrassed me in front of everyone, and all she got was a stern talking to's. Anthony exhaled, setting the magazine down on the tray table. He turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. Maya, let me ask you something. What do you think would have happened if I had yelled at her? If I had demanded she be fired on the spot, Maya frowned. I don't know, maybe she would have learned her lesson. Her father tilted his head. Or maybe she would have walked away feeling like a victim, rather than realizing what she did wrong. Maya didn't respond right away. She wanted justice, wanted to see Ms. Calloway face consequences, but she also trusted her father. Anthony continued, "People like that don't always learn from punishment. They learn from moments that make them uncomfortable. I guarantee you Ms. Calloway is thinking about what happened right now. She won't forget it, and more importantly, neither will the people who saw it." Maya crossed her arms. "So, you're saying we just let it go?" "I'm saying we carry ourselves with dignity. We hold people accountable, but we don't let their ignorance take away our peace." Maya stared at him for a long moment. Then, finally, she sighed and reached for her book. Maybe she didn't get the immediate satisfaction of seeing Ms. Calloway punished, but she had gotten something else, respect. And that, she realized, was worth even more. The plane cruised at 30,000 feet, its steady hum filling the cabin. The tension from earlier had faded, but Maya could still feel its echoes in the air. She glanced toward the front of the cabin, where Ms. Calloway had disappeared after her humiliating realization. Her father had let the moment pass without a scene, but Maya knew this wasn't over. It never was. A soft chime rang through the cabin, and moments later, Ms. Calloway reappeared, her face noticeably paler than before. She approached their seats with stiff, rehearsed movements. "Mr. Daniels, Miss Daniels," she said, her voice softer now, controlled. "I want to sincerely apologize for earlier. I made a mistake, and I should have never questioned your seat assignment." Maya studied her face, looking for sincerity. There was something forced in her tone, something that told her Ms. Calloway wasn't just apologizing because she had suddenly seen the error of her ways. She was apologizing because she had to. Her father gave her a calm, unreadable look before turning back to the flight attendant. "Ms. Calloway, do you know what I do for a living?" She swallowed hard. I do now, sir." He nodded. "I own this airline. I built it from the ground up, and I did so with the belief that everyone, no matter their background, race, or appearance, deserves to be treated with respect. You failed that belief today." Miss Calloway's hands clenched at her sides. "I understand, sir." He studied her for a long moment. "I'm not going to demand you be fired," he finally said, "not because you don't deserve consequences, but because I believe in something bigger than punishment. I believe in change." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "But," he continued, his tone sharpening, "change only happens when people are willing to confront their biases. When we first boarded, you looked at my daughter and assumed she didn't belong. I need to know, do you understand why that was wrong?" Ms. Calloway hesitated, then nodded. "I do. I shouldn't have judged her based on assumptions." "Not just assumptions," Anthony said firmly. "Bias. Discrimination. Let's call it what it is." The words landed with weight. The entire first-class cabin had gone silent, passengers discreetly listening. Ms. Calloway exhaled, visibly shaken. "I'll do better," she said. "I mean that." Anthony nodded once. "See that you do." She turned and walked away, shoulders stiff, disappearing behind the curtain. Maya let out a slow breath. "Wow," she whispered. "That was something." Her father turned to her, his expression softer now. "Maya, people will always make judgments. They'll always assume things based on what they think they know. But the most powerful thing you can do? Prove them wrong by simply existing in your truth." Maya met his gaze, feeling the full weight of his words. She didn't need to fight for her place. She already belonged. The rest of the flight continued in relative peace, but Maya felt the shift in energy. Some passengers stole glances at her and her father. curiosity flickering in their eyes. A few offered small, approving smiles, silent acknowledgments that they had witnessed something important. Maya wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, justice had been served, Miss Calloway had been forced to acknowledge her mistake, and her father had handled the situation with grace and power. But, on the other hand, why had this even happened in the first place? Why did people like Miss Calloway still believe someone like her didn't belong in first class? She sighed and leaned into the plush leather seat. Dad, do you really think she'll change? Anthony Daniels glanced up from his tablet. Miss Calloway? He exhaled slowly, setting the device aside. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not really the point. Maya frowned. Then what is? The point is that she's been confronted with a truth she can't ignore. Whether she changes or not is on her. But we did what we needed to do. We didn't let it slide. Maya mulled over his words. She wanted change to be immediate, for people like Miss Calloway to instantly transform after being called out. But real change took time, didn't it? A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, Miss Daniels?" Maya turned to see another flight attendant, a young Latina woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I just wanted to say," she continued, "I saw what happened earlier. I'm really sorry for the way you were treated. That's not what this airline stands for." Maya blinked, surprised. "Oh, thank you." The attendant nodded. "Actually, Mr. Daniels, the crew and I were talking, and we'd love for Maya to see something when we land." Her father raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" The woman smiled. "You'll see." When the plane touched down, Maya expected to simply grab her things and head to their car. But as they exited the jet bridge, she noticed a small group of airline employees gathered near the terminal entrance, holding a sleek black plaque. The young flight attendant from earlier stepped forward, grinning. "Maya, this is for you." Maya's eyes widened as she read the engraving. First-class ambassador, Maya Daniels, redefining who belongs in first class for every future passenger. Her heart thumped. What is this?" Her father rested a proud hand on her shoulder. "It looks like they're naming an initiative after you." The attendant nodded. "We talked to the airline leadership after your father spoke with Ms. Calloway. This isn't just about one person's mistake. It's about making sure it doesn't happen again. Moving forward, Horizon Airways is launching the First Class Ambassador program to ensure every passenger is treated with respect, no matter where they're seated." Maya's throat tightened. She had come on this trip expecting just another flight. Now she was a symbol of change. "Wow," she breathed. Her father squeezed her shoulder. "See, Maya? Change is slow, but when it happens, it lasts." And for the first time that day, Maya felt like she truly belonged.